Okay, welcome back, everybody. Melanie, we were talking about the pillars within Sino Group from an ESG perspective, and I'm curious, so for organizations that are out there and they're saying, okay, great, we get the concepts, we heard the titles, what are some specific examples from those various pillars in terms of things that you've done, projects that you've funded, et cetera, just so they have an idea, some context for how you all do this?
Sure. So I'll just give you some vivid examples. So let's start with the green. I know everybody talks about climate change, but I want to change the subject and talk about biodiversity, which just to tell everybody here that it's not just about climate change that is important this day for corporate. We were told that with the ISSB launching and many ratings launching as well, companies are required to look into biodiversity. So we know that well in advance. And then with that regard, we have two projects that also work with universities. So the first project is called Coral Restoration, where we work with Archie Reef and have the artificial reef tiles to build underneath the Hong Kong Southern waters to actually save the fragmented coral reefs, help Hong Kong build a bigger coral reefs ecosystem. We also work with the Ocean Park to have a coral restoration center, which is very close to the Panda House, by the way. And the Coral Restoration Center is open to public visitors, and they run a lot of education tours for the local schools as well to see the Coral Restoration Center. So this is one project that really looks into biodiversity with collaboration with universities as well with Ocean Park. The second one, and I know you love going to that, is a place called Shui Hao.
Yeah.
Shui Hao is a beautiful place in Lantau. And
just for those that don't know, so Lantau Island is, I believe, the largest island in the Hong Kong island system. It's where I lived for 17 years, and the Shui Hao, the village she's referring to, is the place that was like where I would always take my kids camping. It's a beautiful, beautiful area on the southwest side of Lantau Island.
yes,
Yeah.
beautiful area. And during pandemic, when nobody could able to fly out, people would just flock to that area, and then they would do a lot of clam digging, and basically the tourist was a big issue because if we look into sustainability tourism formula, if there are more tourists, then that means the risk for that site, right?
Right.
So we see that Shui Hao is a place to promote sustainable tourism.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we work with the WWF, which is very famous NGO, and also with Clearboard, which is also from university students as well, under you guys. So we work with them with the technology from Clearboard. They help to pick up the plastic rubbish from Shui Hao beach because a lot of rubbish will wash up to the beach.
Right.
But if we don't clean it up, it will just end up washing up to the beach as well.
Yeah.
So we have Clearboard, and he runs his beautiful boats for around 2 to 3 times per week to clean up the rubbish. And we sometimes see really big plastic rubbish. And thank goodness we managed to actually save it before it washed up to the site. And we work with the WWF team to set up education kiosks as well. We give out the education kiosks to teach the visitors, international and local visitors, about clam digging. So they have guidelines that if their clam is at certain size, you shouldn't bring them home. You should just release them. It's for the biodiversity value. And talking about educations, engaging with the villages is so important.
Yeah.
So opposite the beach is actually a beautiful village called Shui Hao Village. We work with the villages and we instill around 10 beautiful mural paintings that also promotes the message of marine conservation. So these two projects tells us that when we look into environmental, it shouldn't just be under one company.
Yeah.
It should be a cross-sector collaboration. And
Yeah.
these are examples where we work with universities and we work with NGOs, like-minded partners, to look into that. In terms of the wellness,
Just for a moment, because I want to drill down on that a little bit before we get into wellness, because I think what you said is actually interesting, but also unique. So, I work with a lot of corporates in terms of corporate philanthropy and CSR related things. I've started a number of NGOs, and I just want to kind of talk about how you did that, because from an ESG perspective, number one, like you said, it's not just internal within Sino Group. This is kind of bleeding into that CSR type of like outside, how can we support the community kind of thing. So it's not just internal operations by itself. But then beyond that, you just talked about like a multi-party collaboration where you've identified a place with a desired goal, and then found and brought different partners together in order to kind of ensure the optimization of that eventual goal, which, to be frank, is a bit unique, I would say. in the CSR or ESG space, at least from my perspective in the region. And just before we move on from that, I'm just curious, like, who came up with that, and how did that kind of plan come together? Because again, I mean, in theory, you can just point at a map and pick any location, but that requires a lot of coordination within the company. And so I'm just curious, did you all lead that along the way? Did someone bring that project proposal to you, like the World Wildlife Foundation? Like, how did that come to be?
That's a very insightful question. Well, I have to say, as a large player in Hong Kong, we do receive a lot of proposals.
Of course, yeah.
And I remember opening my email, sometimes there's like 20 new ideas. So picking the best idea is not easy.
Yeah.
And collaborating a project with different partners is also not easy.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of communication.
A lot of trust as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So ideas are driven from our great like-minded partners. So I remember the coral restoration project was actually the proposal that was from Ocean Park to us, and because we have a Fullerton Ocean Park hotel that was next door to Ocean Park,
Okay.
and they felt that as a corporate player, maybe that's something we want to do. So I remember the proposal was sent by the Ocean Park, but even before having the collaboration with Argy Reef and Ocean Park, it takes us half a year to discuss back and forth and sort of what projects we should look into, what sort of strategies we should align. And one thing that I like your question is that the partnerships. Usually a lot of students or anybody will ask me, how long should a partnership be? When it comes to a successful partnership, we're not just looking at short term, but also medium term and long term. So for the coral restoration project and Shui Ho project, our initial partnership was actually at least 3 years. So when we sign a contract with them, it's at least 3 years. And then when the project goes well, we look into upscaling the project itself, then we look into another 3 years. So it's very important to not only sign a contract and that's it, sort of like look into how long the partnership should be. It's also very important.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, so you're moving into wellness in other areas, and I interrupted you, so go ahead and continue.
No worries. Well, wellness. Why I want to bring up wellness is that as a listed companies, we're not just looking at environmental. We also need to look into social, because after all, E, S, and G, right? So we know that, I'm not sure whether everybody knows that by the end of this year, for listed companies in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange required that not to have single gender on board.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we know that even Hong Kong right now is really driving women empowerment and gender diversity as well, and also diversity and inclusion. So a lot of companies, if they were to be sustainability, it's not just about environmental, they also look into social. So with that in mind, we have the Sino Women Connect program launched earlier this year. The program aims to actually connect all the female colleagues from different walks of life, regardless of their background. We have mentorship program where our female leaders will help nurture the young female colleagues that join the company so that they can be more familiar with the culture. And more importantly, yes, we do have scholarship programs to support the female workers that have families and kids as well, so that we can give them subsidies for the kids. Especially Sino Group and many developers, they have many frontline staff. They can be security, cleaners, etc. So we do have a wellness program that really helps to provide education subsidies to help the female colleagues so that they can have work-life balance. We have a lot of great wellness program for the colleagues as well, going to Ocean Park, going to Hoi Ha Marine Center, etc., so that they have more sustainability educations that we can provide for free for our female colleagues and their kids. So supporting women in workplace is also a big trend right now. And it's not just for Sino Group. I see a lot of companies in Asia is also looking into women empowerment programs.
Great. And then the other programs that you have are the other silos?
Yeah. So for innovation is also a big trend, right?
Yeah.
So we have set up a Sino Inno Lab called the Spark at Yuen Long, which is a great area. It connects with the Greater Bay Area. So that the Spark is a big innovation hub where we act as a sandbox to nurture local startups. So for instance, we look into potential local startups and help sustainability solutions. We are the world's first developer to invest in low carbon construction materials called Eco Bricks. So what happened was we helped Eco Bricks to set up their factory at one of our factory industrial area, and then now they did really well. They upscaled their productions, And then we invest in eco bricks. And then we also use these eco bricks at almost a lot of our properties in the Sino Group. The bricks itself is actually made of upcycled plastics, which helps to reduce a lot of carbon, but also helps to reduce the waste as well. So we, as a Sino InnoLab, is not just a sandbox, but we also look into investment in local startups. And then the last one is the community spirit. Community, of course, we do a lot of charity works. But very recently, we also set up a community living room in Hong Kong area. It's a space where we support the underprivileged families so that they can, because as you know, a lot of underprivileged families, they live in very small houses that they literally don't have space to do homework. So we actually use one of our shopping mall vacant space and convert it into community living room, where it provides a large common living area for the underprivileged kids to study, to have tutoring, to have a laundry service there. So it really helps to support the underprivileged families. And then the second one is the heritage. I know sometimes when people think about community, it's not relevant to heritage, but heritage is also part of a community, right? So Sino is so dedicated in heritage. We have, especially for international listeners, we actually have many heritage projects. We have the heritage building convert into hotel in Fullerton, Singapore, Fullerton, Sydney, Fullerton Bay, Singapore, and also in Hong Kong under another foundation. We also convert a police station into a beautiful 9-rooms hotel at Thai Old Heritage, which is the first hotel that won the UNESCO in Hong Kong because of the heritage. So heritage is also very important as sustainability because heritage and culture is so valuable.
Yeah, and for those that aren't familiar with the the term heritage specifically, just to clarify, from a real estate perspective, obviously there's cultural heritage, and in Shui, how you were mentioning to me separately how you're painting murals and doing a lot of ways in terms of like trying to preserve cultural heritage. But from a real estate perspective, heritage a lot of times includes like historical designated buildings and figuring out ways to not only preserve them, but to make them financially viable in a way where we're maintaining that cultural and architectural heritage, but also still using them and inviting community in and whatnot. So way back in the day when I was a real estate lawyer, still practicing real estate lawyer in the US and then here, that was one of the big things that drew me to real estate law, was how do you take these beautiful old buildings and really preserve them and make them useful, today. And one thing that before we conclude this section that I want to just re-emphasize for everybody, again, she's saying these things that I think are so natural for you and for Sino Group that I think we need to just pause and understand they're actually quite unusual. She mentioned 3 different social enterprise startups that your group gave money to early on to help them be successful. So you mentioned Clearbot, you mentioned the Eco Bricks, and the Reef. Yeah, exactly. And so it's just, I think, again, it's not only commendable, but also a great example for other organizations in terms of sometimes we understand that innovation comes from within. Sometimes I think innovation comes from without. And there are places like Hong Kong where it's very, very difficult for a startup, especially a social enterprise or social innovation startup, to really get off the ground. And I think from environmental or other, really, again, any type of social impact type of startup, having an organization or group like yours step in and provide some capital, provide space, to reduce their initial overhead is super, super, super important. Because when you're disrupting an industry or doing something that no one has ever done before, oftentimes the capital isn't there. And in the case of a social enterprise, the legal structure means that even access to capital is kind of blocked a little bit because it's a less traditional type of structure. So anyway, I want to commend that, but also just point that out to everybody, especially if you're within an organization that has these capabilities, because I think it's a great example of a way to focus on ESG and kind of combine ESG and corporate social responsibility and philanthropy all at the same time.
Great.